Hello everyone, this is Zetta, and today I'll be breaking down the project for my latest single, Antihero. If you haven't heard it yet, you can use the link in the description and check out all the tunes on the Untapped compilation that I curated for audio records. I also made a video on that, so check that out as well. This is just Zetta ASMR now. If you like this video, please consider subscribing and leaving a comment, because it really helps me and supports the channel. It's free and you can always change your mind, so let's get to the video. Alrighty, let's get to it. So starting off with the melody, the chord progression here uses a common technique in which you go back and forth with minor and major chords, creating this kind of antagonistic vibe, and it fits with exactly what I meant for this tune, hence the name Antihero. The choice of elements was also picked with that in mind, so I'm using very few elements here, as you can see, that not only makes them sound a bit fuller, because I can make everything kind of full spectrum, but it's also meant to add contrast with my job. So yeah, let's hear it. So these cards, they loop and they enter this bit here with the trap drums, which are also very, very simple. I'm using just regular 808 kick and snare, as well as some percussion elements here, like I have very simple hi-hats, just wouldn't even call these a trap loop, really. It's just a very simple dubstep loop I made here. Very, very simple. I also have an amen break in which I transposed 7 semitones up and used the one-shot mode in the beats warp mode, so that it sounds like this top-end percussive element rather than an amen break. I love that, and it really complements the vibe of that trap part. Down here I also have my 808 and some white noise to make it more appealing. Very simple pattern, and white noise is just SERUM and erosion hiss. And as you can see, still nothing on the effects, still very empty. The effects only start in the build-up, so let's get to it. On the build-up, I switched to my actual dubstep drums here, as you can hear. Pretty standard stuff. The aiming break is back here, playing normally now, but I chopped it up to make it a bit more original. You can see here. The original one's a bit different, but I really like the way this one fit. But it's the same sample from before, except it's playing at the regular transpose now. I have my hi-hat still. I have my atmosphere that plays from the beginning. Is very simple. This is just a quanta patch that I made that uses a vocal sample and granulizes it and freezes it over time, so it's a big atmosphere, but it's very subtle, it's very quiet, as you can hear. I have this stab here, which is a low end element that fills the lower area of this build, basically rising. Also gets washed out by reverb, so that it kind of fades away towards the end of the build. I have my chords still here, they're also getting washed out. I have an automation right here, as you can see, for that, this macro and this auto pen. Moving on, I have my vocals, which are the main element of the build-up. And they sound like they're clipping here, but it's probably because of my master chain, and they're not supposed to be playing it on their own when the master chain is on. So ignore that. But I love them. I feel like they added a lot of energy to this build. And what I've done is I have the main one, which is like playing at the regular pitch. And it's centered in mono. And I have the top end one, which is 1 octave higher with a bit of different formants. And it also has a stereo effect. I think I used Ensemble right there. I used Ensemble to make it completely stereo. and that it kind of wraps around the main vocal here so that both of them work together, and you can hear here. I love it. And yeah, these are all risers that I made. These are my go-to risers. They're all my personal sample pack thingy. There's a lot of stuff that I made here over the years, and it helps me keep my music more consistent. And also I have fun making sound design sessions where I make basses or drums or effects or whatever that I can use later in my music, so I end up having a lot of these samples. There's also this SERUM riser that I made for this track specifically, but it's very subtle as well. Everything is meant just to build volume towards the drop. So talking about the drop, here is the drop. I'll play that entirely in a bit. Right now I'm gonna break it down. So basically on the drop, this is where I feel like it gets more interesting. I try to keep it simple and straightforward without losing the energy that I built from the intro. So I'm using mostly basic shapes for the main elements of the drop, like the main lead and the main layers. So all of them use basic shapes. This one is using a saw wave and sync and all pass and flangers for all of this texture you hear. Everything else is mostly details and or just for mixing really. But the patches themselves are very simple. They're all based off sync modulation and flangers and out passes, but they are basic shapes. So what I'm doing here is I have a couple layers where one of them is quieter in volume, but it's more open stereo. I'm using the unison here, as you can see. And it's completely open in stereo, it's very wide, and this is how it sounds. And this one is very, very similar, but what I've done is towards the high end, it's not as smooth, if that makes any sense. This one is the main layer, it's at 0, and the purpose of this is this one is centered in mono and the other one is in stereo. They add up together and create a full sound, but this one has the texture, the other one has the acoustics. If that's the word I'm looking for, I'm not sure, but that's what I meant to do with this technique. You can definitely hear how more crunchy it is towards the high end, the top end. And both of those are very high pitch. So I have this lower octave element, which is a bass that is introduced even on the build-up with reverb. And this is meant to fill the lower area of my drop. It's a more growly type of bass. And then I have my growls here and my fillers. This is a very old thing. I made this tune quite a while ago, but I still liked the sound, so I just kept it in there. But it's a very old patch I made a whole lot of time ago. But anyways, still on the drop, I want to show you how I wrote this and why it works. I'm using the common technique called call and response, which you probably have heard of. It's been around for a while. A lot of producers have always used call and response to write their music. It's basically like you're creating a formula for your job, and it helps you visualize what needs to come next so that you don't need to guess what is coming next. You can just write it using the formula you created for your jobs. I always use this technique, not necessarily the way I'm going to demonstrate here, but real quick, as I'm editing, I thought I would mention that the way I used to demonstrate and explain this technique was inspired on this very old Dr. Ozzy video. If you want to check that out, the link is in the description. Here you can see that I have 2 measures. First measure is 8 bars, second measure is also 8 bars. So what's going on here? This helps me visualize the general structure, not only of my basses, but also of my entire drop. Everything follows this rule, my drums, my effects, everything. Inside those measures, I have these smaller sections, which are the phrases and the responses. Usually you're gonna have a call, a phrase, and a response. In this case, I'm not using a call, because I didn't feel like it was necessary, but in most cases you will be using all of them. So basically here what's happening, the first phrase, the phrase A, is this. And then I have a response, which in this case is my vocals. And then I have phrase B, which is that variation in the first measure, the first half of the measure. So in this case, what I did is I duplicated the patch from the first phrase and I changed it a little bit. So there's different pitch movement and a bit of faster LFOs. A lot of people think that you need call, phrase, response, and then call, phrase, response. The way I'm doing here is the entire phrase is the call, and the phrase B is the response to the first one, and then it repeats in the second measure. Right after that, you have the second response to this phrase, which is the growl. And then it repeats the same formula, literally the same formula, but with some more variation, more subtle variations. In this case, I go from this kick and clap to an actual dubstep snare. So here's how all that sounds. And I feel like that's a really good variation. I love doing that. I've done that so many times in my music, like Dystopia, for example. But I love just switching back and forth between kick and claps and just actual snares. But this formula here is very, very straightforward, but it helped me to build this drop from scratch without having to be hours and hours thinking about it, and it's very easy and it's fun to work with. What I did for the second drop is I took that same exact method and I variated a little bit. So the first phrase is a bit shorter. It's pretty much just a fake out. I have a filler sound here, which is my vocals, if I'm not wrong. It is, yep. Phrase B is way longer. It's almost as long as the entire measure, as you can see, is pretty big. That's what she said. Okay, sorry. And then I have a response to these phrases, and then it repeats the same formula. So let's hear how that works. I recommend you try and follow the MIDI and how the elements interact with the MIDI, because it's exactly what's going on with the entire structure. Not, again, as I said, not only on my basses, but the entire structure of the song is following this rule, this formula. So let's hear that. It's that easy. I'm just so used to working with this technique. It's so fun to play with, and it helps you so much. It guides you on how to keep the drop consistent and all that. For the second drop, I did the exact same formula as the first one. Sorry, not second, the third drop. For the third drop, I used the same formula as the first one, but with a flip. So instead of having this faster moving patch as the response, I have it as the call. So it's the first phrase, and then the other element that was the first phrase is now the second phrase. Does that make any sense? I think I just explained that very badly. But yeah, if you pay attention, you see that the drop is flipped in the MIDI. And this is now the first main phrase, and this is the response to it. So let's hear that. Yeah, it's the same thing. Very little subtle variations, but I love it. It was so fun to make this tune. And there's not much else to it. As I said, I try to keep it very simple so that there's not a whole lot of crazy things going on. It was just fun to write. I'm glad that it's finally coming out. The one last thing I want to talk about this is the background elements, and these are very simple. This siren here is from another tune that I made. I think it's Bushido or Inferno or both. I think both of them use this. I made this in SERUM a while ago on a sound design session, and it's just 2 sine waves with pitch modulation and a lot of reverb, as you can hear. But it works as a background filler, just like the Soki sample. I have these 2 patches that I made specifically for this tune, and they are filling the tonal ambience of the drop, so that it helps with the energy and the vibe of the tune, really. And from the rest, all I have is really this riser towards the end of the drop, so that it tells the listener that the drop is ending. Yep, that's it. That's the entire tune. Just that. And if you want to see more content like this, let me know. Leave a comment if you liked it. If I said anything wrong, please correct me in the comments. I will gladly reply to every single one of the comments. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.